Altered is at a turning point. Over the last year, we have seen ambitious design decisions, bold moves like the shift to GameFound, the introduction of new rarities like Exalted, and a restriction philosophy that signals long term intent, all bringing pressure and concerns like funding thresholds, questions about cost, questions about longevity, questions about whether this is a long lasting game. So instead of spectating from the outside, I wanted to sit down with someone who has been on the inside, someone who has been on the ground helping build the US scene. We're going to talk about what actually makes Altered feel different from other TCGs and what needs to happen if Altered is going to thrive, survive, and grow beyond the niche. If you care about the competitive future of this game, or if you're watching from the sidelines wondering whether to invest your time into this TCG, or even if you're already deep into the game and you're trying to understand where year two is heading, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. But I think just to start, I mean, I know who you are, of course, and I think a lot of people associate you with being the face of Altered when it comes to kind of the US side of things. I mean, I think you're the most involved at everybody's stateside. So I guess my question really is what is your exact role and how did you first step into being involved with Altered from the beginning?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair way to put it because I'll have people sometimes be like, "Oh, like kohlrabi is, everything for Altered or whatever." And I'm like, "Well, maybe English speaking, but there's definitely, French people championing the game, and there might be people who speak French that don't even know who I am, but I am definitely in everyone's face if you speak English. So I actually got started doing the road show before and after the Kickstarter. And the long story is out there. I think it's kind of in my article on the Equinox website, the Altered website. And then I'm sure I've told it a couple places, but they really just treated me so well compared to other companies that do road shows. Like I have oh, it's right here. I have like a little thank you card that they gave me in the box. Like they let you keep one of every demo deck. They gave you a shirt, and it was just really nice of them and how they treated everyone, so I've kind of stuck with the company ever since, and anytime I've worked with them at Gen Con, PAX, I did have the pleasure of going to Worlds in Paris. It's been the same every time. They're just really great to work with. My role, specifically, I would say, is talking way too much everywhere. Especially in the Discord, but I am not an Equinox employee. I'm not officially hired for anything. I just create content, run tournaments, and am a moderator for the Discord and the Reddit.
Yeah, very cool. I know that, like I said, I think everybody, at least on the US side, knows who you are, especially if they're associated with Altered. So, what has been your proudest moment so far supporting the game's growth?
I think getting to go to Worlds is kind of a shining star, obviously, and it may be the only time that that happens, so I'm glad I got to do it once. It is very costly to travel outside of the United States and, of course, take time, away from home. Surprisingly, like, stay cost in Paris is actually very nice, but plane tickets and, Ubering around, that's always gonna be very expensive. So that was great, and meeting people from all over the community, and I think I've told this story once before, but it really is just so great, and I don't remember her name, so I'm sorry, but she came up to me at Worlds and was like, "Hey, like, you're the reason that I'm here because I jumped into the Discord and I had some questions, and you were very helpful and friendly and helped me get connected to, like, a local group, and now I'm here." And I think that's like, the biggest payoff you could ask for is someone, like, taking the time to come up to me and say that, and then just being like, "Thank you for being so helpful." And that's really, at the end of the day, what I aim to do, is just be there to help people.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest challenges is for the game, at least stateside, is actually growing it and having opportunities to be able to grow it. I know that there's people that are like small pockets that are trying to grow it in their local community, but are somewhat struggling because they either don't have a place to play, they can't get product, et cetera. So it offers its own obstacles to try to grow the community if you don't have an already LGS to kind of support the game.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I continue to tell people, because people can get very down on, the growth in the US or their local scene and wonder what's going wrong. And really, one of the biggest things is with all of the TCGs out there, all of the other products that a game store can sell, all of the other events they have to run, it really takes someone that is passionate about the game, either locally that's able to, be a voice for it, or within the store itself to continue championing it. And sometimes that, just doesn't happen, and a business is going to be a business. So try not to take it too hard. And I always tell people to just coordinate, talk to other people that want to play, schedule things together. There are most likely people that you don't know that want to play, but they're just not voicing it because they're not seeing anyone else planning or voicing it.
Well, I think another obstacle, and you kind of talked about this in the past, is that even if people want to host stuff, sometimes getting product to be and pricing and things like that to be able to host those events can be challenging. So I did see that Altered was now allowing you to, if you did host events, to get kind of a package to be able to kind of support those groups. But I know that some people are saying that it just wasn't enough, that it was kind of lackluster. So,
Yeah, there was a lot of issues, especially for online tournaments before, because Asmodee does not really like to support online play with like product and things like that. And then in person, a lot of the things were kind of in development, whether it be tumults or other pricing. And they obviously have a limit, like a threshold, like you need 32 players for, them to send you out a package. But for a niche game, that's kind of hard. I think Seeds of Unity and all of those issues will kind of remain in Seeds, but this is kind of like starting the path forward. So I've always told people I think Seeds will be like the rocky period, and then if we just keep going from there, it's gonna get a lot smoother. So I'm very excited to see what kind of store support, event support, and things like that they put out with Roots of Corruption. I think we've already seen some of that with the winter finals recently and some of the other online support that they've started for tournaments.
yeah, it definitely seems like they're doing more for the community and their support of the game itself is going in the right direction, but it almost feels like that it's bled a lot of players where many players have already left the game, moved on to other stuff. So I think that's the uphill battle of trying to get new players while retaining old players back into the game. At least that's what I foresee. So
Yeah, and it's not a unique problem that Altered has. It's it's any game. Because of Dexter and Wookie, I'm kind of active or clued into the Keyforge scene, and they have these discussions all the time. And really the only thing I come back to is like word of mouth and telling people about the game if you love it. For the next couple months, it's gonna be really hard for Equinox and Altered to grow in, like, the US. I think France, Spain, Italy, those places will all be fine because they're right there by the hub. They're still going strong. But everywhere else, it is going to be an uphill battle. Interesting note, one of the things that I have seen this week that's actually brought in a lot of new players is TCG Stadium. For some reason, they had way too much beyond the gates, and they also found stock of Trial by Frost and Whispers from the Maze that they forgot they had is what is what they said online, and they just put it on their website for $10 a box. And so within 24 hours, I saw like 4 new people posting new threads in Reddit asking questions, people jumping into the main Discord asking questions like, "Oh, I just saw this game and I got a box. It looks tons of fun." And then we even had someone come into Altered Corner Discord because they are in the St. Louis area, and we house them as well as all the Texas locals. So it is very interesting how something that some people could look at and be like, "Oh my gosh, this game is in so much trouble, $10 a box," is actually bringing in a lot of new players.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because one of my friends actually reached out to me. Of course, I missed the sale, but one of my friends, he messaged me and told me about that, and he ended up buying some because he just heard the game from me and decided that he was going to give it a chance. So, like you said, at $10 a box, it's hard not to at least try, just to open some product and see what you can get.
Yeah. The other thing that is, kinda specific to Altered is some of those people purchase the boxes just to have it be like a tabletop game that they're playing with their partner or, their family, which is awesome. But that kind of situation doesn't really alleviate the one of the main problems that people have, which is finding a local play group. So I think that's another, you know, battle that Altered has to fight in that regard. I did a learn to play in the Dallas area one day, and I taught a couple how to play, and by the end of it, I could just tell that's all they were going to do. They loved it, they bought more of it, and I was like, "Oh, you should come play on Thursdays." And they're like, "Oh, okay, okay." And I never saw them again, because 'cause they're probably just gonna go home and play together, and that's great, but, the people that worry about the local scenes, they don't really see that as often.
Yeah, that was one thing that happened with the play group that I was a part of, where these 2 guys, they were roommates, and they just treated it as a tabletop game instead of actually going to locals, and they just bought every card, did print on demand, and then played at home. Like you said, it doesn't really grow the community if everybody's just playing at home, but I understand both sides of it because it's kinda can
Yeah.
be hard to ask people to commit to going every week. Because I know at least for myself, there was some, like, feel bad moments where you would go to locals and there'd be just one other person. You 2 would play, and then that's it. So there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, and that's where I tell people, just remember to coordinate. Like, one of my biggest things is if you have a local Discord, find the local Discord. If you don't, like, I don't know, make one if you have the bandwidth, or at least, maybe your LGS has a Discord and you can coordinate with people. Because there's probably a couple times where we're like, we have 4 people, we're gonna be there, and then, 2 more people show up. But if we don't have enough people, then it might not have anyone else show up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've seen that as well where somebody just said, "Hey, you wanna get together?" And then it kinda got momentum where people started kinda jumping in and joining. Yeah, like you said, I think for the US, it's gonna be a little bit challenging. I think it's right now, TCGs are just in a weird place in general because there's so many new games and then people playing old ones, especially the market. So trying to get market share can sometimes be a challenge. But my next question for you is what is the moment that you knew Altered was something special?
I think my answer, I don't know. It's a very good question. My answer might be a little different than most because I don't think it's gameplay related. I did the first 2 road shows, and I had actually just been laid off from a tech job, so I couldn't even back the Kickstarter. But I was out there, selling it to people, And since I couldn't back the Kickstarter, that was kind of it for a little bit. But then they had a hiring call for Gen Con the year that it launched, which was, I guess, 2024 now. Yes, September, whatever, 2024. And so I applied and I got a demo position at the demo booth in Gen Con. And it was probably there working with the whole Equinox team because Loki was there, Talia was there, Philippe, Max, Eric, like basically 90% of the team at that time was there and they were helping do demos or they were doing interviews and they were walking around and just every person was really great to work with. Marcus, specifically one of the game designers, I talked to a lot because we were just talking about different TCGs and someone handed us a bunch of Alpha Clash randomly, so we were kind of opening those and looking over the design elements. And really just those connections and how they treated the staff, it was probably, like, what hooked me 100%. After that, I joined the Discord, I started doing everything that I could. October, I started tournaments that year, and, yeah, they're just really great to work with. They were always, happy to invite everyone out to dinner after working. We did a couple drafts and things like that, so it's just the people really, and then the gameplay is actually really good, so that keeps me hooked there.
Yeah, I like the gameplay as well. Like we said, the different formats that they have just so many different formats and different ways to play the game now. But I think the gameplay itself is very unique, and as well as it just offers something that no other game seems to offer, at least in my opinion about it. But speaking of uniques, so unique cards have really defined Altered's identity. Some people really like the idea of the unique system, some people really hate it. What do you think uniques have brought to the game? And has maybe the system ended up hurting Altered in the long term just because of how many people dislike the actual unique system?
I think I don't see too often people that count out the game because of uniques, but there are those people out there. What I mean, I'll just say off rip, I am a huge proponent of uniques. I actually do not even really like no unique, but I'm glad that there's tournaments and the mode for everyone now. What I love about them is when you're playing or even casting at a high level in a TCG, if the meta is pretty set and there's specific decks and deck concepts, you almost know everything that's gonna happen, and you're just like, "Yep, I know that this card's gonna come next, or they might play this, and that's it." And every single time a unique comes out, it's like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta read what this does. I gotta take it all in, see how this is gonna impact the game." And I just really enjoy the variety and the surprise of uniques. One thing I think people have kind of a warped idea of is how much uniques should or do cost. A lot of the times I hear people say, "Oh, I could never do a tournament because I don't have hundreds of dollars worth of uniques." I don't know if anyone knows this, but I don't either. My uniques are all very cheap. I do not spend much money on them at all. I can't be falling out and you can definitely find some really good ones, some competitive strategies for cheap. And there's probably 1 to 2 decks in a 100-person tournament that have those uniques that you have to have a lot of money for. So I guess the one thing I would say to people who kind of don't like the idea of uniques or maybe only played in set 1 and 2 and those turned them off. They actually released an article about how they've been working on the uniques, and when I was in Paris, I got to talk to, Jacques and Francois about this specifically. They really have done a lot of work in tweaking, the algorithm making sure they put into this massive spreadsheet, like, "Don't let this happen," or "This is too strong. This is an ability that shouldn't, happen." And Uniques in Skybound Odyssey were the start of a lot of those efforts getting better, and then in Seeds of Unity, it's gonna be, like, fully fledged. So, definitely take a look at those sets if you saw Beyond the Gates Uniques and were thought those are way too busted, and maybe next year they'll be rotated out anyways.
Yeah, so when it comes to the topic uniques, I'm the same way. I really prefer the gameplay of having uniques. I think it's a interesting system within itself. One of the I mean, I've been on both sides of it where I had a unique that allowed me to have an advantage, but I've also played against people that had better uniques that allowed for them to have an advantage. And as you said, usually once a month, I'll just go through the marketplace and I'll just go to like filter it by the lower end uniques. And
Mhm.
I found some really good uniques that I was surprised that people were selling at that cost for, at least
Yep.
in my opinion, like what they were. So, just once a month going through, taking 10, 15 minutes just to check over the list, just to see if there's anything that people added or maybe the price dropped or, et cetera. Because there's a lot of times where uniques will slip through the cracks where somebody wasn't looking for that particular strategy that you were. And then you can find some really good uniques, like you said, on a budget.
The secret of the pro players is most commonly not that they spent a ton of money, it's that they spent a ton of time. They are, like, glued into the meta very hardcore. They're watching all updates or new cards released. They're looking at strategies, and the second they find something, they go and they search the marketplace to find those uniques, and very often you can get them on the cheap. One really good example that I have is I wanted to have dice rolling uniques for Navenka, and most people were getting ones based off of like resupplying or, returning cards to hand. And I just looked at dice rolling in general, and I found an Anansi that every time you roll dice, it gets a boost for every card in your reserve. And it also had, if you have a landmark, I cost one less, so it costs two from hand instead of three. And now I just play that in my Wayfarer Navenka deck, and it cost me $8. So it's just finding the strategies and seeing the things. I tested it today, and my concept was sacrifice Sierra because of the landmark updates and more landmarks where you wanna sacrifice them to get benefits, like the drop chip, and I found 3 different uniques that were all under 4 mana that say sacrifice a permanent, do something. All 3 of them together added up to $8. That's that's the 3 that you need for a standard deck, so
Yeah, I think, like you said, if you have the time and you're willing to kind of search it out, you can find some really good ones. But another point is you kind of have to understand what you're looking for as well, because
Mhm.
if you don't understand your strategy or what you're trying to build towards, then sometimes it can be an obstacle to try to, look at just this long list of uniques and not really understand if this is going to work or not, just because every unique's not going to just plug and play.
Some of it is luck. Some people pull really good uniques and they got lucky, and some people do have more money than you, but that's kind of unfortunately TCGs in general, so
Yeah, that happened to me at a Tumult championship where a guy went and he just bought all of the high-end uniques and he just showed
Mhm.
up and just dominated everybody. His strategy was, I'm gonna get my uniques out and then just combo them off of each other, and then that's it. So they comboed off of one another, and then there was nothing you could do because they were anchored, and then they just kept on getting, and they were seasoned, anchored and seasoned, and they just kept on boosting, boosting, and anchored, and you just, unless you could remove it, and then he had counters. His whole game plan was to counter your spells. So this is back when Afanis was really big. So I was playing Afanis, and I was like, man, I have so many combo, like I can get rid of stuff because I have so many spells. But he had unfortunately the answers to the questions I was asking, so it didn't really work out.
Yep, yep. The solace that I always take is things like that don't last forever. like Afanis was specifically nerfed because of very crazy loops that he could do, even without uniques that were that special, like magical training, just like over and over and over. So yeah, someone may have spent, $800 to $1,200 on a Robin Hood. They're not playing that now.
Yeah, what was really sad was I ended up pulling a Robin Hood right after they did they benched it. I
Mhm.
pulled one and it was a really good unique, but unfortunately because of the change, it wasn't gonna be that good, but I pulled it the week after they announced the Robin Hood situation. So it's but one thing I do appreciate is that they at least monitor the game closely enough that they do updates and try to not allow any infinite loops like there was some in the beginning.
Mhm.
But I do wish that they did more, I guess, patch updates and more like kind of the heartbeat of the meta a little closer because sometimes it seems like you'll get an update and then you may not get another update until the end of the season.
Yeah. I mean, we are talking on February 9th. Tomorrow is a big patch, so excited to see what happens tomorrow. It's supposed to be a very big one, and we'll have a little bit of time before new cards to see how much it shakes up the meta. So
Yeah, I have my own opinion about that. I've already kind of made a video about what I think is going to happen. I have no, forward knowledge about what's actually going to transpire. But I know that a lot of people are speculating that the meta is going to completely shift and really be shooken up. So I don't know. I think it's going to be it just seems like with Altered specifically that people tend to complain and it's usually like a small subsection. It's at least in my opinion, it just seems like a small subsection complain about certain aspects of Altered, when in reality, I don't think it speaks to most Altered players, you know?
yeah, I think there is maybe been one or two examples where Equinox might have listened to people a little too much. Those, vocal minority you're talking about. But other times there's always, they really do rely heavily on statistics and things like that before they make a change. And I think, and I don't have an exact example of a time where I remember they listened too much. It's probably more so been around non-meta things. I do have an example. In my opinion, one of the things that they maybe listened to people too much was about the tumult rewards. I have mine. Yeah. So the first season had these like oversized cards, and they're like this nice cardboard, and I just keep it in like my setup background, and I really like it. But a lot of people complained because they're like, it's not a playable card, which is fine. But Altered being different than most TCGs, I was like, I like how it's different. Every TCG does playable cards, and then people just try to sell them or whatever. So after the first one, from then on, they were just stamped playable cards. Um, but I think on meta stuff, I think they usually try to focus on stats, and that's why I don't think the hunger will be addressed. I think the hunger is one a lot of people complain about, but probably doesn't actually need to change.
Well, with the cost, I mean, it cost 8, right? So, most of the time, if you're playing it, it's so late game that that might be the only card you can play that turn. So, people can kind of fish it out, that where, okay, if they do have 8 and I know they might be running that, then I just kind of slow play it to then still be able to at least get one side. So,
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta see the writing on the wall when the hunger comes, and I think you mentioned earlier, uniques that stuck around a little too long. The hunger is a perfect answer to those. Before the strongest Muna decks were, the mass anchor spam, and there was just nothing someone could do once, you had 2 or 3 of those out. Now there's the hunger. So, just, gotta learn to play around it and not get in the trap of it, but I also think the longer the game goes on, the less awful it'll feel to most players because there will be more answers and things to play around.
Yeah, I think the thing about the uniques is that, I mean, I'm glad that they at least addressed it in their most recent article where they said, hey, we made a mistake. We lowered them too much. And then now we're trying
Mhm.
to get them back on track. So it seems like moving forward, they at least know the power level that they want all of the uniques to be instead of just having some that were way worse than even the common was, where you would rather play the
Yeah.
common over the unique or having them so overpowered that there was no real solution for them.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next thing I want to talk about is the GameFound. So with the most recent shift, first I just want to ask, how do you view this shift personally? And do you think this has changed how players experience Altered?
Yeah. So I was all for the shift the first time I heard about it. I always say I shouldn't talk about this as much as I do because I still work for them from time to time. But Asmodee really did not do Altered any favors in the United States, Brazil, some other countries, and working closely with the game and closely with game stores, it was very easy to see like how many errors were being made, how little they cared about sharing the game. I mean, we had late shipments, we had tumults where they would send the previous season tumult kit instead of the current. We had, things just not show up when they were supposed to, or sales reps telling people incorrect information, like Alter doesn't have an organized play kit this season. And I'm just like, no, you need to ask them again. There's definitely one. I've seen it. So originally, I was all for it. I was on board. I was like, I think the first one is going to be hard. But then from there, this is way better. And I think overall, I still agree with that because without that change, you wouldn't see all the online tournament support that you have now. Equinox is a lot more directly involved with talking to stores, and I've seen that firsthand. They've called, multiple stores in Texas, where I'm from, to talk with them about the game found. The only thing besides that is what we call Bloody Monday.
Yeah.
There was an update that went out. It was a little too rushed. Not everyone was in the office. Maybe it wasn't discussed enough, and that really did do a number on, the faith that people have in the GameFound setup and Equinox. Um, it resulted directly in the game store that I usually go to pulling out and no longer doing pre-orders for Seeds of Unity. So that part is really bad. Since then, I have seen firsthand how they have recognized the error of that and started to work on better communication. The Roots of Corruption GameFound page is already up, and I think they've learned a lot from Seeds of Unity, like what worked, what didn't. The whole no stretch goals versus adding them late, what dollar amount they put, based on GameFound employee suggestions, things like that. I think they've learned a lot from the first one, but no one can deny that a few of those things really did like put a big dent in Altered, and we just kind of have to try to make it up from there.
Yeah, I know many stores that I have talked to, they reference that exact situation where if I try to introduce the concept of hosting organized play or doing some type of event or ordering product, etc., they reference that exact situation and say, I'm not going to get involved with it. And I think that that is one of the things that is, centered around when you talk about the game found and altered that's in people's minds. So I think, I guess from your perspective, what is something that either they need to do or something that needs to happen in order to, I guess, reassure confidence in players to where they're not so worried about that funding threshold so much where if the game found doesn't reach this pinnacle, then the game goes away.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that the next campaign has a better understanding of their goals. They did mention in the follow-up to Bloody Monday, like, "Hey, like, we hear you. You don't want this game to go anywhere." We thought originally that it would be better to end the game on a positive note than, try to squeak out something we weren't happy with. But we heard you, so we're gonna, try to restructure, try to cut costs, things like that. So my actual hope is the dollar amount is not 2.3 million for Roots of Corruption, and maybe they have a lesser amount. But even if it is that high, I think you can already see based on the timeline they put out for Roots of Corruption how they've taken into consideration people's thoughts and feelings and how the last GameFound went. It specifically states that, retailers have this amount of time and there's going to be a number announced at a certain period, and then there's going to be so many days after that's announced so people can, oh, we're good, we're close to the goal, I'm going to back it now, or whatever. And then really just my personal opinion is if you love the game, there's really no risk. Like there's this weird concept people have where they don't want to buy into something or support something unless it's a sure deal. Uh, Even though backing the game found, if it didn't happen, you would have got a refund, which they expressly stated. But since people don't want to support something unless they know it's a sure deal, they don't support it. But then it can't be a sure deal if they don't support it. So it's like this weird loop. And it's the same thing we're seeing with print on demand right now. Nobody wants to submit a print on demand order because the threshold of 2000 isn't close enough. But the threshold of 2000 isn't gonna get close enough because nobody wants to submit a print on demand order, uh, which they're also addressing this month, I've heard, so that's another story, though, but it is this very funny human interaction that we have.
Yeah, I definitely agree with I've made this exact argument to people that I know is they don't wanna back it because they're worried that it may not actually happen, but then by them not backing it, it then is not gonna happen, so it's like you're self-fulfilling your own destiny by
Yeah.
not actually participating. And as you saw, once it was actually funded and people knew the set was actually gonna happen, there was like a flood of people, at least from what I
Mhm.
saw, that were wanting the product that was, "Oh, I didn't back it. Can I get in now after it already closed?" And I think hopefully those people have an outlet. That's my hope at least, that the people that want the product can still get the product. Because, when it first was announced with the GameFound, they said it was gonna be more of a pre-order system. And
Mhm.
it's seemed like maybe a little bit, but it kinda is the primary way for people to get product as well.
Yeah, the good news and I've been trying to find this out for since the campaign started. In the United States, there's a couple kind of bigger TCG companies or stores, I guess, that sell online. There's Game Nerds, Gamers Guild, TCG Stadium, who just had the really big sale. Couple companies like that, and I've really been trying to figure out if any of them backed Seeds of Unity. And just this last week, someone told me on Reddit, like, "Oh, I play at Gamers Guild. They backed it and everything." And so I asked directly, I was like, "Are they going to sell it online?" And according to this random person, they said yes. I'm hoping that's true because that's like a perfect situation for someone who missed the game found to go ahead and order from somewhere like Gamers Guild, or maybe in, different countries there will be those alternatives. But it's not the safest way to, guarantee getting it if you really want it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
very
I
true.
think a lot of people are really gonna want Roots of Corruption. If you have not seen the preview and the trailer and the art, I think a lot of people are gonna be, really interested in the set.
Yeah, I've since that announcement's been made, I've seen and also people have messaged me about Altered, about just that set, because
Yep.
I would go to say that I haven't seen this level of excitement since the beginning with the Kickstarter.
Mhm.
After the Kickstarter was released, that 2024, that end of that year, and it's kind of feels like that again, where it's like the end of 2024 kind of level of excitement, at least on my end, talking with the people that I know, where they're really
Yep.
excited for this next set.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I think I had people that were like, I thought I was out after, the change and everything, but I just saw Roots of Corruption and damn it, I might be back.
Yeah.
Uh and it's not just the theme and the art and all of that, but it's also kind of exactly what I thought would happen. Seeds was always going to be kind of rocky. It's a new system, it's change, people hate change. And then they learned from all of that, took in feedback, and Roots of Corruption is also going to be an implementation of all of that. Collector boosters are going to be a little different. There's going to be different accessory offerings, art treatments, like things like that. And it's just direct, from feedback and learning from doing the first one.
Yeah. So, how do you personally see Altered's longevity? And I guess what gives you the confidence that it will be around for a longer duration?
Yeah. So my answer is kind of in twofold. I think a lot of people don't want to accept that it might not be the biggest thing in the United States. Like a lot of people are really ride or die play in person. And that is great. But if you can also incorporate playing online in and get used to BGA, it is extremely worth it, especially more so now. So I think it will be always both. I don't think they're gonna go 100% digital, but at least for the next year, it's going to be a lot more popular in person in the places, where it's continued to be France, Italy, Spain, and then other little pockets here and there. Like you and I were talking about Japan, Philippines. I think there's a really good scene in like Quebec and Brazil, I haven't heard too much from. They had a really rough go with some of the shipments, but maybe we'll see for seeds.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that they support the online so much and that they have tournaments. And I know that a lot of people's complaint about the online is that there's no way to do limited. And
Mhm.
want to be able to play limited because, as me and you already spoke, is like limited is one of the best ways to play this game. So I know that some people threw out the idea of them creating some type of client to be able to play limited where you can do the limited format if you want and you can actually keep the cards. I don't know how they would do that. I know that there's quite a few challenges. One, trying to tie your account to that, and then how are you going to buy the packs? I know there's a lot of speculation about how they could do it, but I do think that offers its own challenges with trying to do something so ambitious, but we'll see if
Yeah. They've kind of like they haven't outright uh, said no, they'll never do their own client. I think the one thing that Eric said, either in an AMA or in the Discord, was it's very expensive. It's not something that is likely at all right now. But if the game, continues and it starts getting more successful, maybe that's something that they could look into in, year 2 or 3, most likely 3, depending on how you look at the years. What I try to tell people is you can play draft online, on Exalt's table. You can't use uniques, but I have done a couple different drafts. It's not my favorite. I would love to have it on BGA, and who knows? They just added singleton and no unique, and they're adding some other stuff that I'm not supposed to talk about, but is very cool. So keep an eye out for that. Maybe in a couple months they'll have some form of draft, but as you mentioned, it is a much harder thing to deal with than even singleton or no unique or anything else because you have to open packs. Then you have a deck that has, up to 3 different factions, which opens all sorts of new interactions. So, for now, if you have some friends, try to see how it works on Exalt's table, and who knows? Maybe in a year or 2, we'll be, playing draft online as much as in person.
yeah, I know when you mentioned that on Stadium TCG, when they offer that sale, a lot of people were just getting the product just to do drafts,
Mhm.
that they just wanted to buy it just so that they could have the actual packs to do drafts with. that they were just because I think, for myself, and I'm sure you're the same way, if you have bought any type of product, you probably have most of the commons, if not all of them, in the rares. So either you just want uniques or you're just trying to draft it if you're already an established player. So for those older sets. But that kind of leads me to the next thing, which is the new rarity with being exalted. And the hit rates are going to be somewhat lower per box because you're going to less packs and you're not going to be able to get very many of those unless you buy multiple boxes. Then you add the print on demand cost. How do you see the balance between cost and accessibility when it comes to this new rarity or just print on demand in general?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and some people don't like the reality, and I mean, I'm not a fan of capitalism as much as the next person, but, it's the reality a lot of us live in, and one of the biggest complaints about Altered was that there is, like, no chase. Uniques didn't feel like a good enough chase because it might not even be the faction you want, it might not be a strategy you want, or maybe in the past it wasn't even playable. So they have introduced new things to create a chase directly because it was one of the biggest complaints about Altered. Luckily, exalts are not the hardest thing to find, and at least the base normal art should be pretty decently found. If I were to just guess at, like, exalt costs when it kind of settles, I would say maybe around, the hunger or something like that. When they first come out, who knows? Maybe people try to sell them for 30 bucks or whatever. But I can see them getting down to around the $6 to $10 range. What has the lowest drop rate in Seeds of Unity, at least, is, full arts, alt arts, the serialized things like that, which are all things that don't directly impact the game. And I think that's the way that Altered will continue to do it, which some people also might not like that. But once again, one of the biggest complaints about Altered was packs were not exciting to open. And as we've mentioned, that's why sometimes people might only buy a box to draft and not because they want to open the packs and find cool cards. So it's gotta be this balance, but I see Altered still staying as a pretty affordable TCG option all around.
Yeah, I think that is for earlier sets, it is quite affordable. But for the newer sets, they've definitely retained their original price. I mean, to get the last set or even this set, it is going to cost you a little bit more to get the physical product. And one of the complaints that I've seen people have is that print on demand costs are so high. And so you're forced to either buy the product or if you don't want to buy the product and you just want certain cards, you're going to pay a more heftier price to get it actually printed.
Yeah, print on demand is a hard one because I feel like the first couple, quarters or months that it was out, it was actually a very reasonable cost, especially if, you ordered more than 1 pack. And luckily, they introduced group orders, which has saved people a lot of money because they can kinda hit that maximum discount. But these past couple months, I really don't think there's anything other anything else to blame it on other than, like, the economy and everything that is happening. The costs have become a little more significant in some areas, and some of that is shipping costs, which, man, shipping's a whole 'nother story, especially, from one country to another. If I wanna send, like, tournament prizing to someone in Italy, it'll cost me, like, $35 for just a small little bubble mailer. So, I don't know. The biggest benefit is, you can sell the cards you don't need on the marketplace and then turn around and use that on print on demand, but some things with, dollar value, economy, it's gonna be rough.
Yeah, that's actually what I did was I just sold the cards that I was no longer going to use or needed and ordered the fund the print on demand so that I could actually get the cards that I wanted. So I don't think it's as much of a barrier as people want to make it seem, but it definitely I see people not very happy about the price and the shipping, and it's because they're just like, I'm pretty much buying a booster box by getting a deck.
Yep. There's another kind of weird concept on, like, industry standard versus what Altered is doing. So, industry standard is, of course, TCG Player, and, people are used to just going on there and buying singles and ordering from TCG Player. So, when you tell them that Altered has its own, like, fully contained system, they kinda, you know, it breaks their mind, they don't know what to do. But even then, there's, like, cards in the first set of Star Wars Unlimited that are pretty playable, at least as far as I know. Like a Darth Vader or something can go for, like, 6 to $8 a card, and then you also have to still order that from someone unless you have somewhere in person. So there's, like, this industry standard is what people are used to, so they just accept it, but something new and different is new and different, so they don't accept it as easily. Um, but overall, outside of shipping, I think print on demand is a really, really good deal.
I don't think it's as bad as people kind of make it seem, but I could see to an extent their perspective as I'm paying if I can only order 2 packs and then I'm paying the upcharge of 2 packs plus, but like you said, there's group shipping now and that lowered the cost and
Yeah.
is a lot more affordable where people can do groups and then the shipping's lower. So I think if people just have a play group, it seems to be more affordable than if they try to do it on their own.
Yep. You could just gamble, just open boxes, gamble.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if but, the earlier product seems to be more readily available, but some of the later sets, the last set and this set, it seems like it's more scarce. I think it's because
Yeah.
the print runs were not as high than the
Yeah.
earlier sets. So, but with you being so grounded in the US scene, from your perspective, what do you think is the most important thing that players can do to grow the community? I get in their either the local area or just in general, because you mentioned that Altered is really just like a niche game. And how is there a way that Alter can become more, I guess, mainstream, or is it always just going to be a niche game?
Yeah. I I mean, some people might not like the answer. I think it will always be that kind of, niche game. I don't ever see it being like Riftbound or Magic or anything like that. But I also don't have a problem with that. Like I like it because I like it, and as long as it keeps going, I'm happy. It doesn't need to, have 40 people every single week at my LGS. So really the thing that I just always keep telling people is you just have to express that you want to play it, show it to people, maybe take it to events if there's like an open TCG event. Sometimes cafes or schools or things like that will do TCG nights. And just communicate with, where you want to play that you want to play it. And that is one of the easiest ways for a game to grow in certain areas. And I see the exact same thing with Grand Archive at the store that I go to. There's, like, one guy that keeps everyone rallied every single week, and, he posts updates, "We're doing this here. This is a special event. We're doing this. Here's the sign up." And I think that's just the reality for a lot of games that don't just automatically bring in 20 people just without doing anything. It it is unfortunate. I think those games that are highly popular because of their IPs get away with a lot of things that smaller games have a harder time getting away with. Riftbound has not been without issues, but it's so popular that it just gets blown over quickly. So you gotta kind of realize, things happen, and if you love the game, just keep telling people about it.
Yeah, I think one of the obstacles for Alter though is the LGS itself. It's hard for them to
Mm,
sometimes make money back on the game because I had one owner, he kind of explained it to me like this. If I have the product and I have it on display, it's relying on people to buy the product. And if people are not buying packs, then I can't display singles because I either have to scan them to my account or risk somebody scanning it to their account. So there's no real singles market for me to be able to sell to my local group. So then I'm just relying on sealed. And if there isn't a large enough community to want to buy the sealed product, then I'm pretty much taking up shelving space and a dedicated night where I could host another kind of event for that particular game that may or may not be even fire. So that's one thing I've heard.
Yeah, that is the ultimate struggle, especially with stores. And like I said, I understand it's a business, and it's much easier to, do a magic event that sells out versus doing some of these smaller TCGs. Like even in some stores, One Piece, is a smaller game, and in some stores, it's like their most popular game. What I try to tell any like store owner or person who wants to play the game that I can talk to about situations like that is, especially with this new GameFound model, a store can take pre-orders ahead of time and they can say, "Oh, we have 6 people that want to buy a total of 12 boxes or whatever. That's 2 cases." They usually get some freebies thrown in, like for Seeds of Unity, it was some collector boosters and different things. I really don't see how a store could not sell at least 1 extra case of Altered if they wanted to throw on 1 extra case on top of their pre-orders and use it for events, tournaments, or just sell it. I think the stores that have the hardest time are stores that have 0 online component, which is kinda crazy to me in 2026. But I keep begging them to let me run an online store, but because Equinox is so focused on LGSs and keeping them happy, they actually won't let you run a digital store. So, I don't know, send them my email. I'll sell a case for them.
Yeah, I try to do the same thing. I try to get, the say I'll host the event. I just need you, the LGS, to order the product so that I can get the product. But yeah, it seems like that's definitely an obstacle to if you are trying to grow a community, you kind of have to upfront all of the cost yourself and then hope that you can reel in players because some LGSs are just seem less likely to want to invest time or money into the actual game itself.
Yep. If you have an LGS that's open to work with you and very friendly and doing all of the things, stick with them because that's great. But yeah, some people unfortunately just don't have that, or maybe they need to try a different LGS. You never know until you try.
Yeah, very true. So we briefly mentioned the next set, and we kind of talked about the excitement because I do think that everybody that's at least been in the game for a while will agree that the next set looks very interesting and brings a lot of newness to the game. And I don't think that it's going to have any complications funding it as long as they don't make the price astronomical.
Hmm.
I know that's one thing on people's mind is what is the goal going to be? Is it going to be extremely high or is it going to be more reasonable? And one thing I said in my last video was you're asking a lot of your community if you try to fund so high of a level consistently every 3 to 4 months.
Hmm.
It's a big ask. So this next set, I mean, I think we both would agree that it's going to be a success. But beyond that, what do you think that they need to do to keep people, I guess, excited and engaged to want to stick around and play the game beyond just one more set?
Yeah, I think the timeline they've laid out is a good start because we're gonna know what the store total is, and then we're gonna have some time for, personal backers to complete that number. And when they announced the numbers from Seeds of Unity, it's not like it was, extremely far off of the goal they put out. I think it was like 2.3 instead of 2.5 or something. Um, so knowing that is going to help a lot of people because 'cause we'll be like, "Okay, stores put up this much. The thing that I don't know for certain yet, but I'm definitely going to be vocalizing, maybe in the Masubi or, I'll just bug Loki or something, is a little more clarity around certain things with stores. I saw there was some confusion on collectors boosters and other things, which I think will help stores order more. And then really, if Roots of Corruption takes everything they learned from Seeds and, moves forward and has more clarity and is successful, I think from there it'll just be business as usual. And off of that success, they'll be less worried about, you know, repairing damages from one announcement and doing new things going forward. More live streams, more community events. Once things start to stabilize, they'll be able to go to conventions more and just a lot of things like that. I know they're working hard on new ideas. They just have to get over that hurdle of being, financially successful first.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for the company themselves is themselves. They've kind of handled some things less than optimal, and that could be the announcement that was made, or at the beginning, there was a lot of people that left because of the way that things were handled and released. So I'm just curious to see once they get past all of that and kind of get a foundation beneath them, because it seems like they do have a lot of good ideas. They're trying to do a lot of interesting things, and they're being ambitious, but the past is kind of, I guess, haunting them per se. So if you could paint the ideal future for Altered, what exactly would that look like? I know you mentioned that it's okay to be a niche, but ideally, what would you want Altered to be in just in general?
Yeah, I think a continuation of where it's been the last month would be my ideal look at it, and then expanding upon that. I've mentioned that they really only have employees in Paris now. Previously, there was Justin who worked in the North American area, um, but he has moved on, and now they don't really have anyone over here. I mean, so shooting for the stars, me working in North America for Equinox would be amazing. I'm practicing my French if any of them watch this, so they can note that down. Um, but really, like, if it's just like as high as I can go, it would be a community manager. They don't have a community manager anymore. Loki is the community builder, which I think if you know all of the stuff he has to deal with, very easy to see that a second person would be very helpful. And maybe even community managers in different pockets. So I think one in like Brazil or Latin America, just in general, would be really great. One in North America in regards to like Mexico, United States, Canada, and then, an APAC around Philippines or somewhere. That would be dope very specifically, but just more content, more sets. I really enjoyed their designing seeds and their unique article. So more stuff like that. I was actually digging and digging for this art that I cannot find. And I noticed on ArtStation there's actually a lot of art processes that the artists have put out on, concept of certain characters and where it ended. Seeing stuff like that is super cool. So just more visibility around that and just more of a vibrant community, I guess, is what my dreams would be.
Yeah, I think I mean, I would want the same thing. I think all players that are invested into Altered just want to see Altered be successful and grow. And there's ways to do that, but it seems like sometimes the obstacles are maybe more than people want to invest in. It could be financially or time or responsibility, etc. So if somebody was considering playing Altered for the first time, what would you kind of say to them to get them involved and invested and kind of stress that the game is worth their time?
Yeah. If you are okay playing online, that is an incredibly easy sell because I always thought one of the best things about Altered was the one-to-one collection. And it was funny, I actually explained it to my wife the other day, because she doesn't really play card games, and we were opening some packs, and I was like, "Yeah, so I scanned this card in, I still have the physical card, you and I can play, but then now I have all the cards online as well, and that's what I use to play online." And for a long time, there's so many different, products where people have wanted that. I used to play a ton of D&D, and if you bought a physical book, for a long time, people wanted you to have a code to get the book digitally as well in case you were running a campaign online. You couldn't, you had to rebuy it online. Magic, same thing. I have physical Magic cards, but if I wanna play on Arena, I have to get a new collection. So, that is, to me, like, one of the biggest and best things of Altered in general. If you only like playing on paper, I think it's going to depend on, how you wanna play it and where you're located. If you wanna play, with your family, this game is perfect. Even though Roots of Corruption looks a lot spookier and scarier, they they do a very good job of keeping a lot of the dark themes within the lore, and it's a very, outwardly family-friendly game. And if you have a local scene, that's an easy sell there, just go join up with the local scene. And I truly do think that the company listens to feedback and takes it and implements it. It's I've never had a relationship with, like, a game company like with Equinox. You can go into the Discord, you can bug certain members of the team, you can see them interacting, giving updates, and for a lot of these bigger TCGs, that's just impossible.
Yeah, I like the accessibility for sure. I think it also allows for them to get direct feedback from when things go right, but also when things are not. But like you said, I'm glad that they drive the decisions more based off of statistics and not just opinion because there's a lot of
Yeah.
opinions out there. So, yeah, I think they're in position themselves to be in a unique place, and I'm really excited for, Seeds to get past, moved on in the sense of being able to, like I said, build that foundation to actually be able to do what the game would that they envision instead of always playing
Mhm.
like, I guess,
Catch up.
yeah, like catch up or damage control in a sense.
Yeah.
They're always try to convince people that they're doing the right thing. But no, I absolutely love the game. I played quite a few TCGs. If you've seen my channel, you know that I've kind of invested into a lot of different TCGs. And I always seem to always have that kind of itch to play Altered because it's just unlike anything else. And there's no other TCG that just has that kind of gameplay and the strategy and the different dynamics. But I think the uniques do help with that kind of variance.
Yeah. Another really great way in my mind that Altered sticks out is I play a lot of TCGs as well or have in the past, but now I mainly only collect the other ones and I play Altered. I did Star Wars Unlimited for a little bit. I did road shows for that as well. And I don't know what it is because they play very similar. You could argue that Altered has two lanes, sort of, and you do the mana of your own cards, things like that. You do this kind of back and forth. But in Star Wars Unlimited, you only put two resources down to start, and in Altered, you put three. I don't know why. That just feels so much better. And then the fact that you aren't doing direct combat is actually a huge benefit to the game because there's still a ton of strategy, but it's not this like stacking a ton of things in limbo or fighting, units against each other and wondering how to do that. It's a very well-made game.
Yeah, I also think that because it's not head to head in the sense of your whatever hero, leader, etc., is fighting against another leader. A lot of the people that I know that play Altered is actually people that enjoy board games, and
Mhm.
they're more drawn to Altered than other TCGs because it's kind of a hybrid game that's at least the people that I know that are pretty invested are actually people that were primarily invested in the board games and then found Altered and really enjoy Altered now.
Yep. Yep. If you like board games, check it out. It's one of the benefits of Altered, and then at the same time, one of the downsides for a TCG. But I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, that's all I got for you. I appreciate your time, and I just kind of wanted to give you the floor to, share any last thoughts or comments or plug any socials or anything like that. Just any remarks at all.
Yep. If you get into Altered, you will definitely see way too much of me. So I am kohlrabi everywhere. Whether you enjoy that or not, know that you can always just shoot me a message or ask me a question in the main Discord or find me in the subreddit if you don't use Discord. And I am more than glad to help. And then really the only thing I would shout out is look for your local scene. If you want to play Altered, get connected with them. And yeah, if you have questions, there's a reason my name on the main Discord says at me bro, because you can always at me and I will respond to it when I wake up. If I was asleep, I'll still see it. And thank you, of course, for inviting me on. I feel like I don't know how long you planned, but I feel like we talked longer than I thought because it was just really good conversation. So I'm very glad you invited me on.
Yeah, no, thank you again for taking the time to, do this. And like you said, I reached out to you and we were able to set it up. So thank you again.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll have to do this again sometime when after the Seeds of Unity gets kind of established and obviously the next game found, and we'll work something out, I'm sure.
Yep,
All right.
and I'm looking forward to seeing more about Thai TCGs.